Part 2 of the Civil War, Furnace of Civil War, 1861-1865, PowerPoint presentation, video explanation, Part 2. And we're going to begin this with Gettysburg. Again, all images within this video presentation are in the public domain. Please do not hesitate to email or give me a call if you have any questions. So we're going to begin Part 2, beginning with. So as we left off at the last PowerPoint presentation, Part 1 from Chapter 21, we left off with this idea that you had Chancellorsville, this battle at Chancellorsville. So I just wanted to kind of give you an overview here, remembering that we focused kind of first of all here at Bull Run, the first battle of Bull Run right here. Let's change this color. First battle of Bull Run kind of right here, and then we have this Peninsula Campaign, and the Peninsula Campaign kind of goes up this peninsula here, trying to get to Richmond. Then the second battle of Bull Run, kind of the second battle of Bull Run, and then we have this battle up here in Maryland at Antietam area, in this region right in here, trying to get a victory on northern soil. You have the defeat at Maryland at Antietam or Sharpsburg, so the South then retreat, and then North has to pursue that retreat. That leads us to the Battle of Fredericksburg, then the Battle of Chancellorsville. Both defeats or victories for the South and defeats for the North. At that point then Lee once again thinks head up north and get a victory on northern soil. Kind of revisit that idea when he was in Antietam. But they've regrouped, had two victories. Let's go up north, get a victory on northern soil. So now we are at a place where the North, now Hooker has been replaced by General Meade, and the North then must pursue. So the North comes in this way, and Lee, we're going to talk about how Lee is already entrenched up here in Gettysburg and looking for a fight in northern soil. Hopefully, if you're at all interested in this Civil War topic, you'll spend some time looking at Gettysburg, and we'll briefly look at it. But Gettysburg is one of the most famous U.S. battles, and we're going to focus in on a 3-day period. And so where Antietam is considered the bloodiest single day, Gettysburg is probably considered the bloodiest battle, but it's 3 days. Close to 50,000 casualties on both sides. Again, kind of if you look, pretty much when you look at casualties, a draw, but because it's on northern soil, a draw is good enough for the North. The South must retreat. Anytime the enemy retreats, then it's a victory for the other side. And so these are the two generals in charge. Of course, we've still got the Southern General, General Lee, and Meade has now replaced Hooker, who replaced Burnside, and Burnside had replaced McClellan, who replaced Pope, but Pope had replaced McClellan, who had replaced McDowell. So it's kind of a mess for the North, but Meade is now in charge. And remember, well, then we also have a very important general that is reporting to Robert E. Lee, and that's Longstreet, many others. But the people that are the commanders in charge are Meade and Lee. So let's look at Gettysburg, Day 1. So Day 1, we have two long lines that I wanted to focus on. Two long lines. You have the North, and they're spread out this way, and they are pursuing the other long line, and the other long line is kind of like this. And so in this situation you have General Lee and his straggling forces here, the stragglers. They hear a rumor that there's maybe some shoes, a shoe warehouse in Gettysburg, and so some of these stragglers start to kind of trickle off into the town. Now the cavalry for the Confederate forces are out in front. So the cavalry for the Confederates are out front here, and they're really not supposed to be there. A good cavalry keeps in touch with the enemy. A good cavalry maybe should be down here, but they're not. And the Union cavalry is right here. So the Union cavalry kind of gets into a skirmish with the end of the Confederates' line. The end of the line. So that gets us to day one. And you can kind of look here. At the end of day one, you have all of Lee's forces turning around and trying to attack. And you have kind of the lead forces, maybe this is a better map, the lead forces of Meade. Now, there is a ridge. We're going to put a ridge kind of right here, and the skirmish on day one is important because the skirmish on day one results in a Confederate victory, or at least it results in a Union retreat. So Union has to retreat out of Gettysburg, but they retreat to this ridge, and they get the high ground. So the Union retreats to this ridge, and this might be a better map. Let's see. So this right here, as the Union pushes forward, and as the cavalry retreats, they both consolidate on this ridge. So at the end of day one, you have the Confederates retreat, turning around and pursuing, and you have the Confederates lined up here, and you have the Union lined up here. So that's the end of day one. A skirmish in Gettysburg, and the scene kind of set for both sides facing off against each other on day two. Now, this is John Buford. John Buford is the commander of the Union's cavalry. And then this is Jeb Stuart. Jeb Stuart has replaced General Jackson. Jackson died. Jeb Stuart has replaced him, and Jeb Stuart, the cavalry for the Confederates, is not relevant in day one. So John Buford is the hero. Jeb Stuart makes mistakes and is nowhere to be seen at July 1, day 1. Now we'll move into day 2. And again, hopefully you'll spend some time, if you're at all interested in this, you'll spend some time looking at maybe some video clips or doing some research on your own. So day 2, as we pointed out, you have the Union lined up here in the southern part of Gettysburg, and you have the Confederates lined up right here. Now the strategy here is that the Union, for the first time in a long time, the Union has the high ground. The Union has really good ground. Now Lee he does not have to attack. Lee could just retreat or go up north and continue to cause trouble. But Lee wants to attack. He feels like this is the moment. And so Lee, rather than attacking full frontal, Lee tries to do several flanking maneuvers. And the most famous, this is day 2, the most famous flanking maneuver is down here. And this is day 2, and it's the battle at Little Round Top and Big Round Top. And so this is John Hood versus Josh Chamberlain. These two commanders, John Hood for the Confederates and Josh Chamberlain for the Union, and this is at the southern end of the line, and you have Round Top and Little Round Top, and you have this maneuver to try to go around, and Chamberlain and the Union are very heroic in extending the line and then also launching a counterattack down the hill and preserving the line. There are also heroic efforts by the Union in the northern flank as well, but most of the fighting is focused on the southern flank. Not much happens here in the middle. And so, end of day 2, the flanking maneuvers by the Confederate forces are rebuked, and day 3 is setting up to be a monumental day. So these are just some images of the actual Round Top. So you can see with Union forces entrenched on the ridge, it was a very daunting task by the Confederates to launch this attack, one in which several of Lee's advisors advised against. But Lee felt like this was the moment in time where the Confederates could actually perhaps gain a victory on northern soil and maybe even win the war. So these are just more images of kind of on Little Round Top, the rocky high ground that the Union held, Josh Chamberlain held, and the Confederates had to charge up against. And they charged several times, but eventually the Union was just too much, and the geography was just too advantageous for the North. So then the third day, July 3, this marks the high tide of the Confederacy, but there's going to be an all-out, full frontal assault. So this full frontal assault is going to occur with this line here and this line here. Remember, day 1 you had fighting up in Gettysburg. Day 2 you had this attempt to flank both in the north but especially in the south. Day 3 you're going to have Pickett's charge, and it's going to focus everything right in the middle of the line. Day 3, Pickett's charge. So kind of an illustration, a charge right up the middle. The commanders in charge are George Pickett. He reported to Longstreet, who reported to Lee, but Pickett was in charge of the middle against Winfield Hancock for the Union. Winfield Hancock for the Union. So this charge occurs kind of right in the middle, straight in the middle, everything focusing right here, and a full hard day of fighting, charging over open field, charging over a fence, right into the heart of the Union, and the Confederates almost broke through, but some last-minute reserves were brought up to fortify the middle, and the middle stood firm, and Pickett's division was annihilated. Wasn't much left of Pickett. And so, at this point, the Union wins the Battle of Gettysburg. The Battle of Gettysburg is won by the Union. And so then, back to this slide, after day 3, the Confederates are forced then to retreat once again, just like they did from Antietam. And as you might suppose, the general in charge, much like McClellan after Antietam, the general in charge, Meade, does not aggressively pursue the retreat, and so even though this is kind of the high point for the Confederacy, and never again are the Confederates in northern soil, never again are the Confederates able to win any substantial victories, they are still, because of this retreat and no aggressive pursuit of the retreat, the Confederates are allowed to fight again now for another 18 months or so. And so it was a major mistake by Meade, even though it was a major victory by Meade. It's a major mistake after the battle. Meade is then, of course, fired, and he is replaced by General Grant. So meanwhile, during Gettysburg, out in the west, in fact, the next day, the day after Gettysburg, you have some battles. Battle of Vicksburg is very important. Battle of the Mississippi River, and General Grant is successful. This allows the Union now to start to carve up and separate Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana from the rest, and really put into effect the blockade and this anaconda kind of approach of squeezing kind of on all three fronts, but squeezing the South. And so General Grant is promoted to be the general over the entire Union forces, and General Grant understands what Lincoln referred to as the bloody or the brutal arithmetic. And Grant was successful in employing total war. And one of the most important components of total war was William Tecumseh Sherman and his march from Atlanta to Savannah, and his march of total destruction. Once Johnson is defeated at Atlanta, General Grant occupies Lee, and there's nobody to confront William Tecumseh Sherman. So he marches from Atlanta to Savannah, and basically burning and destroying everything in his path for about a 2-mile wide path. And so this is just a photograph of one of the things that became famous by Burnside was the Burnside Necktie, where he would take a railroad and basically light a huge fire on the railroad hot enough to heat up the iron, and then he'd bend the iron and sometimes even bend it around a tree to make a bow tie out of the railroad. This was just his signature and a way to destroy the railroad, destroy transportation in the South. But this is an aspect of total war, and kind of hopefully the idea was causing the South to bow in submission and ultimately accept surrender. So the brutal arithmetic, as General Grant and President Lincoln understood at Grant, because of his number of soldiers, Grant could trade 2 men for every one of the Confederates and still beat the enemy to his knees. So public opinion in the North was appalled by this blood and guts type of fighting, but critics cried that Grant the Butcher had gone insane. But President Lincoln also understands that if the Union has 50,000 troops and the Confederates have 30,000 troops, and the two face each other and both sides lose 10,000, it's going to be a victory for the North. It's just the brutal arithmetic, and Grant was somebody that was willing to enforce this, unlike any of Lincoln's other generals up to this point. And so eventually you have the surrender by Lee, the surrender at Appomattox Courthouse, and the aftermath of the war. The Civil War took a grisly toll. About as much as the American 600,000 died. 600,000 men died, in action or disease, and over 1 million were killed or seriously wounded. Hopefully this will help you just get kind of a very, very brief understanding of the Civil War. You could spend several classes just focusing on the Civil War, but tried to make this as brief as possible. Please, if you're at all interested in certain specific aspects of this war, spend some time on your own researching and exploring all of the amazing stories of the Civil War. And so this concludes my presentation over the Civil War, Part 2 of Chapter 21. Please don't hesitate to email or give me a call if you have any questions. But this concludes the PowerPoint presentation, Part 2 from Civil War, Chapter 21.